President Joe Biden delivered a zinger against his political opponent, Donald Trump, at a recent speech that I want to discuss. And you may have seen it. It got lots of coverage, but then I'll show you a second clip that will be more of what we spend time discussing in this segment. Super important. But first, here is the fun clip. They're both fun, okay? We're going to talk about infrastructure in the second one. That's fun too. Gosh. But the first one more funny. And while you're watching this, please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. It makes a huge difference. Just takes a click, but to me, it means the world.
You know, I have to say, if Trump's stock in the Truth Social, his company, drops any lower, he might do better under my tax plan than his. Possible.
So pretty funny there, referring to the fact that Trump's True Social stock or Trump Media stock has been plummeting so rapidly, which was sort of expected given the disaster that Truth Social is. And so as that plummets, I guess Trump could no longer be at the top of the economic ladder, which we know Trump's policies are aimed at benefiting just the top of the economic ladder. Hilarious, but it's premised on an actually really important point, which is just that when you compare Joe Biden's policy record and Donald Trump's policy record, the contrast could not be more stark when it comes to who is being invested in, who is being uplifted, and who is being shoved down. And under Trump, the one big achievement, I guess is how he would refer to it, legislatively, was the massive tax cut that disproportionately benefited those at the top of the economic ladder. But lest you think that's the only thing we're going to see from Trump, he has promised in a second term to do it again. Wealthy people who are wealthier than ever aren't wealthy enough, he believes, and he thinks that another round of tax cuts for the rich should take place. And that's something that he promised in front of a room of wealthy donors, said, "You're wealthy as hell, and I'm gonna cut your taxes even more." However he sounds. Whereas Joe Biden obviously has a very different approach to policy. With that being said, an example of this is Biden's discussion of his record on infrastructure. And we'll play a clip here, then I'll discuss that.
Thanks to my bipartisan infrastructure law, we announced over 51,000 new infrastructure projects all across America so far. We're just getting started, including roads, bridges, ports, airports, clean water systems, high-speed, affordable internet, all across America. You may remember my predecessor promised infrastructure week after week after week for 4 years and never built a damn thing. Nothing. No, I'm serious. Nothing.
You know, I gotta be honest, I forgot about that little moment in this. So, another zinger.
And by the way, these projects are going to be using American-made material like American steel, American concrete, creating good-paying American jobs, union jobs. Why? As I said, I've already said it, but since the 30s, the law said we could do that. And that's exactly what I'm doing. And we're buying American. We are selling American. It's all about America. We buy America, and past administration, including my predecessor, failed to uphold that Buy America provision. Not anymore. That's over.
Yeah, so referring to the federal government under Biden buying American, because the federal government obviously spends lots of money on things, purchasing materials, etc., and so it can make that decision to just purchase from American companies, and that does make a huge difference, not to mention the investments in American manufacturing and the CHIPS and Science Act and projects being created by the infrastructure law. And what he's referring to there obviously was specifically this infrastructure law that was bipartisan but mostly supported by Democrats, and is the largest investment in infrastructure since the Eisenhower Highway Program, a really major piece of legislation by itself. It's especially notable given that this comes in the wake of Trump spending his presidency promising to do an infrastructure plan, and that never happened. And the joke is, because this is what they would refer to it as, is they're going to have infrastructure week where we'll announce the plan. It'll be this amazing thing. And it just kept not happening. And it was 2 weeks away every week. And that's a trend with Trump. But what this brings me back to is something I talked about in a segment yesterday, which is if I could just get even a MAGA loyalist, to only observe American politics through the lens of purely policy, not the personalities, not the rage you have about woke or something, not any of that. Just on paper, what is it that either side is doing in terms of their governance, right? In a very objective sense, on paper, which policies are either party responsible for? I think I could get, if I could do that, which is impossible because people are driven by all these other things in politics than just policy, as we've learned. But if I could do it, I think that so many people would run so fast away from MAGA, away from this modern version of the Republican Party, because think about what it is that we're talking about here with Biden's policy record. I really can't believe, and I don't believe, that most Americans, even someone who considers themselves really conservative, I don't believe they actually, in their heart of hearts, again, if you removed all the other layers, have an issue with the infrastructure investments Biden's talking about there. I'll show the map that I've shown before, the White House creates, that's interactive, that shows all the projects. You can click on individual ones and see how much is being invested, what is being invested in, etc. The tens of thousands across the country, as you're seeing next to me. I don't think most Americans have a problem with that. Projects that create jobs, bring wealth to communities, invest in necessary infrastructure elements like roads, like bridges, like public transit, passenger rail, airports being updated, ports being invested in clean and reliable drinking water, broadband to rural, often conservative communities. Biden's getting that done for y'all. I don't think most Americans have a problem with that. And that's the unfortunate thing about covering politics, because you realize, oh, wait, so much of what's going on, so many things that are responsible for people's voting patterns have nothing to do with the actual policy governance of a particular elected official. And that's a huge bummer. And that goes for healthcare expansions, for ACA recipients, and for veterans getting their healthcare expanded under Biden, or him overseeing the large federal investment in public safety, including law enforcement, violence reduction. I don't think most Americans find that controversial or horrific. I think that's very common sense and should be popular. Even the historic investment in green energy, I think most Americans could understand the importance of dominating that transition to a green energy future, so that we have thriving industries and jobs here throughout that process, and we don't have to cede that ground because we're behind the ball to other countries, not to mention these forms of energy being cheaper for consumers and better for the planet, so there's a livable planet for our kids and grandkids. I don't think Biden's pro-labor stances are that controversial to most Americans. I don't think signing more executive orders on gun violence prevention that are common sense is controversial to most Americans. If you stripped away the Fox Newsification of everything, and by the way, within that similar theme, overseeing this historic and rapid decline in crime, where violent crime is now near more than 50-year lows, and crime generally to pre-pandemic levels like that after the huge spike that happened under Donald Trump going into the presidency of Joe Biden because of the pandemic and Trump's mishandling of these conditions. I don't think most Americans have a problem with Medicare being able to negotiate drug prices. Come on, is that crazy? We currently spend way more as a country on prescription drugs than any other developed country on the planet. And that should stop. So this is one tiny step in that direction, and I think most Americans could approve of that. I would be shocked if Americans had a problem with the recovery efforts that Biden oversaw, which have contributed to the fact that our economy has been recovering in a way stronger fashion than our counterparts across the globe. A good example of that is currently, and hear this because I know my longtime viewers have heard all this before, but this is a stat that we just learned. The G7 is a collection of 7, can you imagine, advanced developed democracies: Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the UK, plus the United States. And among the G7, so we often compare ourselves economically to them to sort of see how our peers are doing economically, these advanced developed democracies. We're currently doubling the GDP growth of every other G7 country. So that's what I'm talking about when I say we're economically outpacing all those other countries in our recovery. It's the real deal. Doubling GDP growth. My goodness. So I could go on, but I think you get the point. If we could strip away the layers, if we could strip away the fear-mongering, if we could strip away the Fox News lens that people look at the world through, if we could do that and just remove all this garbage, I think a lot of people would be less divided. And the interesting thing is when Democrats are governing, as we saw in the first 2 years of Biden's presidency, with unified control of the government, they still do a lot of bipartisanship. A lot of what I listed had some bipartisan support. Now, it couldn't have gotten done without Democrats, but it had some bipartisan support. And that shows the willingness of Biden, of Democrats, to govern across the aisle. We don't see it the other way nearly as much. My goodness. And so we could have a world where there's some bipartisanship, there's some serious governance, some common sense achievements, making people's lives better. And we don't have to have this sort of division. But the way to push back against that division is to discuss the things I'm discussing while just as aggressively pushing back against, aggressively meaning politically, against this MAGA ideology, because that's what's deteriorating the sort of serious governance I'm talking about here. And it obviously is so unfortunate that that's the case, but we can't get to a better future where we are having more serious policy discussions solely until we make MAGA politically irrelevant, because they're the obstacle to that future. But anyone who likes common sense governance, likes level-headed discussions about policy, there's a place for that. And it's a part of the pro-democracy, anti-Trump movement. And I welcome you to join it. Let me know what you thought of all that in the comments.